Church, Dave here, coming to you with our second video. Just been a great week to hear the stories of how your home churches have been going. It's just great to hear how you've been hanging together, doing food together, doing life together, sharing Jesus together. And my prayer is that it will really stir our hearts to love God more, love each other more, but also to see that overflow into the people around us. We desperate to see people saved, to come into the knowledge of Jesus, to not be lost for eternity, but to know him. And our prayer is that as we do this thing in a real way, as we become vulnerable, as we get excited by who God is, just simply because of who he is, that will become an overflow in our lives. So today I just want to share with you all just a couple of things around the book of Esther. We've been looking at that for our daily reading this week through the 6th chapter of Esther up to verse 13. And so just to share a couple of bits, hopefully you've been discussing that as a group, and when you met on Sunday, had an opportunity to look at that. And the important thing is, as we look at God's word, is to ask ourselves, okay, so what does that look like for me? What does that look like for us? How can we apply this thing? So they're the kind of things I want to encourage you to do. But here's just some thoughts as I read through the chapter, just for a few minutes. So the context is we've had a bit of a break. So just to recap, Esther is queen. God ordained her to become queen. Just we see God's sovereign hand, sovereign plan over her life, Mordecai's life, but over everyone's life that's involved. And she's become queen. And we know that there's this guy called Haman that wants to wipe out the Jews. He's not happy with Mordecai because Mordecai wouldn't bow down to the king or him. So he wants to wipe out the Jews. He's trying to plot, he's trying to scheme. But God is still in control. God is still using all of these things. And as Haman plots to get Mordecai hung, God does something incredible. So this is where we pick it up. So chapter 6, verse 1, on the night that the king could not sleep. That's just a great thing. So is God waking him up? Is God trying to stir in his heart and he doesn't know it? It says he gave orders to bring the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. So I guess if you want to fall asleep, get a boring document about just things that have been happening. And maybe if you read it enough, you'll fall asleep. But God had a plan in that. God wanted him to read that. Because look, as we go on, verse 2, and it was found written how Mordecai had told about Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold and who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So what's the chances? The king can't sleep. He asks for the book of Chronicles, and not only in this huge book, which chronicled literally everything that was going on, he finds this one part where Mordecai saves him from being killed. If we ever doubt that God is in things, we need to read these things and remind ourselves, no, God is in control. We never need to fear or worry. Even when people are plotting and scheming against us, trying to take out our life, like Mordecai's, God's got a plan. He's already working through it. Verse 3, and the king says, what honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? The king's young men who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered. Once again, what's the chances that Haman turns up just at that moment? God is perfect in all his ways. I want to encourage us that God is sovereign. He's in control. He's at work. And just then, just as he's asking these questions about Mordecai and what's happening, Haman turns up. So Haman just enters the court of the king's palace to speak to the king about Mordecai being hanged on the gallows. So his idea is, wipe out Mordecai. But God has another plan. So verse 5, and the king's young men told him, and Haman is there standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman said to himself, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? So this kind of thing, oh man, I could maybe profit from this. So I can not only wipe out Mordecai, but actually I could get something from it. Pride. Proverbs 16 tells us that pride comes before a fall, before destruction. So we see this happening. We're going to see it play out as, Haman says, actually, I want to get something. There's sort of materialism there going on. There's this pride going on. There's this desire to have greater status is going on. And so he thinks that to himself. And so Haman comes to him and he says this. Verse 7, Haman said to the king, for the man who the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes and the horses be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. So he's trying to get something from it. Verse 10 just starts to backfire. Then the king says to Haman, hurry, take the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so to Mordecai. He must have just seen his face, his jaw drop. Wait a minute, that was for me. I wanted Mordecai to be hung. You're actually now going to honor him with the things that I want. He says, verse 10, the king says to Haman, hurry, take the robes and the horse, as you said, and do so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing that you've mentioned. So Haman took the robes and the horse, and he dressed Mordecai and led him through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man who the king delights to honor. So not only does this great thing happen to Mordecai, but Haman is the one who has to do it. I mean, humility, from pride to humility to wowzers, God just works, doesn't he? We get worried, we get concerned. Things don't look like they're panning out the way that we want. People come against us. And we think, where's God in this? And he's right there in the midst. And he's turning even the evil plans of others for good. Mordecai doesn't get hung, but he gets praised. He gets honor. He gets these riches bestowed upon him. Verse 12, then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning, with his head covered. And Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, If Mordecai before whom you've begun to fall is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. Maybe a prophetic word from his wife, maybe just can see what's going on, who knows, but she's completely right. And we're going to see as the story pans out, every time Haman plots and schemes and plans, God is one step ahead of him. Sometimes we think about God in our own finite ways. We often like him to ourselves. Yes, we're made in his image, but we think maybe he can be caught off guard, or maybe he doesn't see what's going on, or maybe Satan or the enemy's got the upper hand. All of these things are absolute lies. All of these things are there to get our eyes off of Jesus. But my encouragement is, as we continue now through this book of Esther, as we begin to wrestle with it and discuss it, that we see God is in control. Even now, as the COVID rates rise, even now, as Devon being first of all, was the lowest numbers, now we're kind of up there as the highest. God is still in control. God is still at work. We still don't need to fear. We still just need to listen to God and be obedient to him. Mordecai would not bow down to the king. And because of it, Haman wanted to destroy him, and not only him, but the Jews. And he goes to tell that to the king, but God has already gone before him. God has already prepared the chronicles, kept the king awake, got him to read, or the others, the guys to read for him from that very area where Mordecai had saved him. And even when Haman came to try and get even riches for himself, it was all given back to Mordecai. I want us to remember as we go through this week and this day that God is in it. I don't know what you might be facing at the moment. Maybe you're worried about those COVID rates rising. Maybe you're worried about financial pressures or work or family, all of these kinds of things. Trust that God's in it. Choose to delight in him. Choose to believe in him. Choose to worship him and serve him and walk in obedience to him. That's the key. That's what Mordecai did. He walked in obedience to God. If we choose to walk into obedience to God, we can trust him and leave him with the rest. Because even if it doesn't pan out the way that we thought, God is still using it for good. God still has our future in his hands. He has eternity in our hands. We can never be lost. We will always be with him, whatever we face, whatever comes our way. So be encouraged. Think about how that's going to cause you to live this week. Think about how that's going to cause you to share with each other this week. Think about how that's going to cause you to love on those that don't need Jesus, or don't know Jesus, this week. Let it cause you to love God more and live out for him every single day. So I just want to thank you for just listening to this short video. Be encouraged, keep plugging in, keep sharing Jesus, and see what he does.